Hi, I'm Clare Murray Adams. I'm a mixed media collage artist. There are many approaches to collage, but today I will be demonstrating how to create a layered collage using other mixed media materials on a wooden substrate. Thanks, Picosin Arts, for this opportunity to share. Let's get started. I will be using a wooden cradled board as my base and drawing from the materials that you see here, like gift wrap paper, maps, sheet music, that kind of thing, photocopies of people and some magazine imageries. Also, glue stick, matte gel medium will be used to adhere everything, and then I'll be adding acrylic paint or watercolor or colored pencil to the final project. And I often use a brayer, seldom use scissors. I like to tear the paper, but these are just some options for someone creating a mixed media collage. I like using a wooden substrate like these cradle boards to make my collages. I often start with a random assortment of papers for the background. If I want to make sure that the edges of the piece stay clean, I'm going to paint, I would put this blue painter's tape on the edge. That way I won't spill any adhesive or paint. I'll get it along the edge. When I'm done with the piece, I will probably varnish that. You can also put all of your papers on and then let them run around the edge of the, all the way around to the back. And that gives you a different kind of look. I'm going to start this collage with an assortment of papers that I have here. And I'm going to apply them with matte gel medium. Here's my matte gel medium. And I use a brush to apply that. So I'm going to paint the matte gel medium onto the back of my paper. And then I'm going to place it on. A lot of times if there's a nice clean edge, I start with that in the corners or across the top. And then I'll use a brayer to make sure that it's down, completely down. You want the paper to be really tight to the board because we're going to be adding wet, different kinds of materials to it, and we don't want it to bubble up. This is a thin piece of paper from a dictionary. I like to use dictionary pages because the print is so small and it's different from what you might find in a magazine. And then it's nice to have something with some bigger text on it, some bigger fonts, and so I'll use this right here. So you get the idea. So this is how I would start a collage sometimes. Okay, so this is a start. I have a board already prepared. It's right here. And so the next step would be to add some color. You don't have to, but that's what I like to do. I like to kind of diffuse some of what's going on there by painting with some color on it. So I'm going to start with a limited palette. I have some yellow ochre, a little bit of cadmium red light, some white, and then this little puddle here is some glazing liquid. So the glazing liquid will thin out the paint and make it more transparent. It still is the same color, but it's transparent. And I love yellow ochre. That's one of my go-to colors. So I'm going to paint that on. And I'm going to try a little bit of this cad red, which I'm going to mix with the light white because it is pretty intense. And I'm using the same brush and just mixing things around so that the colors will mix on the brush and on the palette, and on the artwork itself. You could paint just part of it, or you could paint the whole thing. And anything you don't like can end up getting painted out. I'm going to add a little more white to this. I guess I should use another brush. And a lot of times I end up using a paper towel to kind of mush things around, with mush being a technical term, of course. So it's just a matter of getting this to look the way I want it to look. There's not quite enough yellow in this, so, and too much pink. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. I'm losing a little bit of what's in the background, which is fine. That's what ends up becoming the history or the soul of the piece as you're working through things. Okay? So this is where we're at this point, and I'm going to dry it down with the hair dryer so that it's nice and dry before I add any more collage. A lot of times I like to work from artwork that I had already previously made. And this is an accordion fold book I made on a piece of paper that I rusted. It has some found leaves on it that I got in the fall. They were kind of damaged and deteriorated looking, and then I did some stitching on it. So I photocopied that piece, part of that piece, and I'm going to use it on this board. So I tore out, just like I did with the paper, I tore out around the leaves. I decided to use the two smaller leaves because I feel like this big leaf is too large for that 6x6 cradled board. So here's my artwork with the two small leaves adhered on, and then another piece of paper from something that I bought at a craft store that I added to it to kind of balance out what's going on the paper. I feel like this white background that's behind the leaves is too stark, and it looks like these are just stuck on top and not integrated. So a big thing for me is integrating all of the pieces of a collage together. So I'm going to use the paint that I had been working with before, and I'm going to try to paint in this background behind the leaves so that it becomes more part of the piece and not something that's just sticking on top. So I'm going to make my yellow ochre a little bit lighter by mixing some white into it, and I'm going to try to blend that in a little too much white. And I paint a lot with my fingers. Kind of brings me back to my childhood days. So I'm working light enough so that I'm going around the leaves, but if I get a little bit of paint on top of the leaves, it's not going to matter or cause a problem. And maybe a little bit of water. This is where I would want to not use too much water because that photocopy paper is pretty thin, and if I'm using too much water, it might tend to bubble up. But a lot of times if that happens, you can kind of counteract that with, when you dry it with the hair dryer, it kind of sucks back down into the paper, to the original paper that's in the background. So I'm going to use my paper towel a little bit and kind of work that all together. Okay. So this extra paper that I glued on looks like it was some kind of a receipt or a paper that you would find in school with the ruler down the edge and the lines going across. So I'm going to use a micron pen, which I'll show you in a minute, and extend those lines. Okay, so here's the micron pen. They come in a lot of different widths. I like a really fine one, and I'm just going to, by eye, extend some of those lines on there into the rest of the picture. That integrates this particular piece of paper with the rest of what's going on in the picture. I like the lines that are going up and down, so I'll extend those, a couple of those as well. You want to be sure to use these micron pens when everything's really dry. The tips are really fine, and it's really easy to clog them up. And these little guys are not cheap, so you would want to try to use them with care. This is pretty pastel-y, so I think I'm going to try to add a little bit of brown. So I've got some burnt sienna going on here that mixed with a little bit of white, and I'm going to paint some of that on as well. I didn't use any of the glazing liquid in it, so I think I better add some so that I don't totally cover over things that I don't want to lose. I'm kind of a geometric artist, I think. Sometimes I tend to make boxes around things and use a lot of geometric kind of imagery or geometric kinds of shapes in my work. So we'll add a little bit of that in. I'm going to add just a little more down here. And now I think I'm going to add some white. I think I need to hit it with some white because it needs a little more contrast. So I'm going to put some white in here around those leaves. And you can see that it's kind of it's a back and forth kind of thing happening. The piece is talking to me. I just filled in that white area to get rid of it, the white that was on the photocopy around the leaves, and now I'm going back and filling it in. Kind of turning this piece of paper that's on the side with the lines on it. It was kind of creamy and beigey, and now it's almost like it's a white piece of notebook paper. So the leaves are a little pale. They look too much like a photocopy. So I'm going to use some of these water-soluble crayons on them. And let's see if I have those in a spot where you can see them. I can wet the paper first. Now this is where I might create a bubble because I am going to make things a little wet. I'm going to wet my leaf down a little, and then I'm going to use one of the crayons and color over top of that wet area, and it sort of automatically, magically becomes watercolor. It's fun to work with a lot of different kinds of materials and media when you're working with collage. That's one of the things I love the most about mixed media. There's always something new that I can try and incorporate. So a little bit of blue. And there really doesn't need to be a lot of water on your brush. It just needs to be wet enough to kind of mix things up. Now I've lost a little bit of the shape of my leaves, so I'm going to dry this piece, and then I'm going to go back in to it with that micron pen and kind of outline the leaf a little bit more. So here's the micron pen. They come in a lot of different widths or thinnesses. I like them pretty thin. This one's an 05, but a lot of times I like to work with a 1 or a 3. So I'm just going in and kind of reestablishing where the veins were and adding some additional little marks. It doesn't have to be exactly what was there, but it helps pull that out. It doesn't have to fit right on to the leaf. It can go a little outside. The coloring outside of the lines is okay here. I'm also going to write over top of the words that were already written here kind of loosely, to just give them, and maybe not even the words that were there, but just something to random marks that are going to look right writing that can fill in some of the void there. So I'm kind of following a little bit of what's there, but exaggerating it or making it illegible. To me, these things don't really need to be read. You don't need to know what they say. It's more like the writing is kind of a visual texture. Okay. I also had some stamps, and there's a pretty nice little bird stamp right here. And there was a stamp on this piece of paper that I put on there originally. I'm going to add this bird stamp up there. I guess I could have just licked it and put it on, but I will use the matte gel medium. And I'm going to put it on at a little bit of an angle. That's different than what was there. Brayer. And then I'm going to use a little bit of white with glazing liquid in it so that that stamp isn't so much different from everything else. It's just too bright sticking there. So I'm just gonna go over top of it. You would call this a glaze. And just go over top of that stamp and incorporate it into the rest of the piece. Incorporated into the original photocopy I put on here, there were some circles down here that they had been French knots that I had sewn onto the original artwork that was on that rusted piece of paper. And I like those. I can't sew on this, of course, but I can go in and add those little circles to indicate where those French knots were, which I think adds something unexpected to the piece. Also, I'm going to put a few little dots and marks up here in various parts of these leaves, because the leaves were were falling apart, and I'm going to indicate that with these little holes that were in the leaves. Okay. Sometimes just little drawing marks are an interesting addition or aspect to what you're doing, something, again, that's kind of unexpected. So I think I'll stop there. There you have it. You can see the finished piece, or it's really not finished. I would probably work on this some more. I can also then eventually take off this blue tape, and I will put a little varnish on that edge to seal it and make it look a little more professional. I think I have some additional collage images that you're going to see right at the very end here to show you. They're not on wood, they're on paper, and they're from my Sheltering at Home series that I've been working on since the pandemic. Thank you for joining me, and stay healthy and keep collaging. Bye. During the stay-at-home orders, I have been making small 5 by 8 inch collages on paper with remnants of other projects. The series is titled Sheltering in Place. You can see more of them on my website or by visiting Instagram. Thank you to Pocosin Arts for this opportunity to share a video.